Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to supply chain modeling. I have already shared with you a video segment on course introduction and logistics. So you have that lesson plan. So please refer to that for details of lesson plan. Our module 1 is Introduction to Supply Chain Management, and this module further has two parts. In part 1, we will introduce to you the supply chain management and some basic terminology related to supply chain management. So learning objectives include to understand what is a supply chain and what is supply chain management, differentiate among 3 decision points in a supply chain, understand 4 cycles in a supply chain, visualize a supply chain from pull-push view, differentiate between vertical and horizontal integration. So these are the learning objectives. First, we will see what is a supply chain and what is supply chain management. So what is a supply chain? Supply chain is 2 or more parties linked by a flow of resources, typically material, information, and money that ultimately fulfill a customer request. So supply chain is about 3 flows: flow of material, information, and money. And there are at least 2 parties involved. There can be, of course, more than 2, but there are at least 2 parties involved that are linked by a flow of material, information, and money. And ultimate goal is to satisfy customer demand or customer request. So let's take a very simple example. So if there are 2 parties and we call one party to be, for example, say manufacturer, and the other party is, let's suppose, customer. So the flow of information is generally two-way, but commonly this is the customer that delivers this is the customer that actually places the order. So mostly the flow of information in a general setting starts with the customer. So customer places the order, for example, with the manufacturer or retailer. And there is the flow of information from this manufacturer, for example, to the customer as well. For example, on the status of the availability of the product that the customer is asking, or any other details related to the order that the customer has placed. But of course, information sometimes can start with the manufacturer or retailer as well, just like we see in marketing. For example, mass marketing introduces a new product, so information related to the new product is communicated to the customer by the manufacturer, for example. So the basic point here is that this information flow is two-way. It depends upon the situation whether information flow starts with the customer or manufacturer. But of course, it is not one way, it is two-way. And in general settings, for a standard product, generally it starts with the customer, and then there is to and fro and flow of information. The second flow of material or the products. So we call it physical flow. So in a manufacturing supply chain, and I will here emphasize that in this course, we will basically focus on manufacturing supply chains. The reason is that most of the terminology that we use nowadays that is available in literature actually also focuses manufacturing organizations, because the concept of supply chain basically started with the manufacturing organizations, specifically automobile manufacturing organizations, and more specifically Toyota. So automobile manufacturing organizations, and especially most of the concepts of supply chain emerged from Toyota. or other automotive manufacturing organizations. So in this course, our focus will mainly be on manufacturing supply chains, but we will touch upon service supply chains as well, that is the supply chain for service organizations. So flow of the material or flow of the product is from, in this case, left to right, that is from manufacturer to the customer. And the third flow is the flow of money or cash. So that is from the customer to the manufacturer. We will see these three flows and their nature in detail in the following slides. But here we are trying to understand what is actually supply chain. So it is the relation or the linkage between at least two or more than two organizations or parties through these three types of flow of material, information, and money. Now, practically, the situation is, of course, more complex than this. So, in this case, for example, we have, again, let's suppose one party, that is the supplier on the extreme left side, and a customer on the extreme right side in this case. And here I would emphasize that the word supplier and customers are relative. Relative in the sense that it depends upon the scenario we are talking about. For example, now this supplier is the supplier for this first process. So these are actually the three processes that are being performed within the organization. So we call them P1, P2, and P3. So on left side there is supplier, on the right side there is customer, and this is our producer or manufacturer. So you can see that the supplier is outside the sort of boundaries, or you can say the setup of this manufacturer. So that is an outside party. Customer is also an outside party. In the basic focus of the supply chain management, as we saw in the discussion on lesson plan, is to integrate these different parties. So one integration is happening here between this manufacturing organization and supplier. So that is one interface. Another integration is required here at the other end of the organization and the customer. And of course, this integration is also required within the organization between different processes. For example, process P1 and P2 and P2 and P3. So again, you can very easily see in this simple demonstration that material or components are flowing from left to right in this case in gray color. Information is flowing in both directions, but here again the basic source of information is customer. So from customer to, let's suppose, process 3, that might be marketing, then process 2, that might be, for example, production, to process 3, that might be procurement, and then to the supplier. And of course there is corresponding reverse flow or opposite flow of the information from supplier to process 1, say procurement, then production, then for example marketing, and finally to the customer. And then this green color is showing the flow of cash. So customer is the ultimate source of money or cash in any supply chain, and the rest of the cash flow is sort of net cash flow. But the source of income, source of financing in supply chain is customer. So customer is the ultimate source of cash flow. So again, this was a relatively more complex supply chain which had more than one process, in this case 3 processes in manufacturing, and other than customer we had an outside supplier as well. But still it is a relatively simple scenario. This figure is important. This is also showing a supply chain that is sometimes called the value chain as well. Here you can notice some very interesting things related to the flow. So again, here again on the left side are the supplier, then manufacturer, distributors, and customers. So one thing that you might notice here is that, for example, this manufacturer A is delivering the product to customer through 2 channels. And we call those channels to be distribution channels. So we can say that manufacturer A here has two distribution channels. One distribution channel is manufacturer A is delivering to distributor. Distributor is supplying to retailer, and retailer is ultimately supplying to the customer. So that is one distribution channel. That is one distribution channel. So that is from we are sort of ignoring supplier one. We come to supplier, but supplier one is also, of course, the part of the supply chain. So this is one distribution channel that manufacturer A is using. Another channel is this one. Manufacturer A is directly supplying to the customer. So that is sometimes called DTC, direct to customer. And this model was very successfully used by Dell computers. So Dell first had this type of supply chain network. We also call distribution channel or distribution network. So there are different names for the same things that are used. So Dell initially had this sort of supply chain. It had distributors and maybe retailers as well. So it was simply not supplying directly to the customer. And then it moved to direct delivery to the customer or direct to customer, and that actually helped Dell a lot in becoming the number one supplier of computers all over the world. So we will discuss that case study in some detail as well. So that is one thing that we can observe that manufacturer A is using two distribution channels and network. One is through distributor and retailers, and they are called actually intermediaries. And the second is, so one is through intermediaries and second is direct to the customers. Another thing that you might observe with respect to manufacturer B here is that manufacturer B is using two distributors. So manufacturer B is using this we call it, for example, distributor 1 and this distributor 2. So manufacturer B is using distributor 1 and the same retailer that manufacturer A was using, and then of course supplying to the customer. And it is also using distributor 2, same retailer, and then customer. And thirdly, manufacturer B is directly supplying to the retailer as well. So you can see that here manufacturer B is using 3 distribution channels, or distribution networks, you can call them. So it is supplying through distributor 1, through distributor 2, as well as through retailer, and ultimately the customer. And this distributor 1 is common with manufacturer A and manufacturer B. So distributor 1 is taking product from both manufacturer A and B and then delivering to the retailer and finally the customer. And that is also practically a very common thing that is done. And similarly for manufacturer C, you can see that manufacturer C is having just one distribution network and it is supplying through distributor 2, through retailer, and through the customer. So it is also possible that an organization has only one distribution channel or distribution network. And again, you can see that distributors are common with multiple manufacturers as well. Same is true about retailer, that is common with multiple distributors. So one more thing that you might observe is that this supplier 2 is owned by manufacturer B. So maybe it is another organization that is sometimes also called a sister concern or subsidiary of manufacturer B. So, and again, physically that might be within the plant, maybe, or might be an independent plant, but that is not an independent supplier like supplier 1 and supplier 3. They are independent organizations, but supplier 2 is not like that. That is um, the part of manufacturer B. So might be that was not the case initially, and it was done using backward integration that we will see later what it is. Backward integration. So that might be the result of backward integration. So supplier 2 might not be the part of manufacturer B initially, but manufacturer B acquired it later on, or merged it with its organization later on. So from all these things, you can see that the word supply chain might not be the best word to be used. In fact, it is a network, supply network, because there are not sort of linear flows in this diagram we can see, but it's sort of network. So word network or network design and network analysis is sometimes also used to decide the number of, for example, distributors, their location, similarly number of retailers, their locations, how much to deliver to them, and so on. So that is called sometimes network design or network modeling as well. So again, this was a relatively simple view. Sometimes the supply chains are even more complex. But the common thing that we have seen so far is that the customer is just basically ultimate goal. Its demand needs to be satisfied, and organization can decide what will be the distribution channel structure, direct delivery or through intermediaries, how many intermediaries, and things like that. They have to be decided. Now, these are sometimes called echelons or levels. For example, if we talk about the supply chain of manufacturer A, so it has 1, 2, 3, 4. If we ignore the customer at the moment, so it has 4 echelons. So one level is supplier level, other is manufacturer itself, third is distributor, and fourth is the retailer. So this supply chain has 4 levels. Now there could be more than one distributor, but level is the same, right? So level is the same. For example, in this case, supplier, manufacturer B, and retailer. So that supply chain has 3 levels, 3 echelons. So we will see some more terminology in the following slides as well. And this is yet another description showing almost everything that we have seen, but one thing is new here. So again, here we have suppliers. We have 3 suppliers here, and that is our manufacturer, for example, and here we have customers. And this is our manufacturer. Now, manufacturer is also called not exactly manufacturer, but the organization that controls the supply chain, and in the manufacturing organization, that is almost always the manufacturer, is also called this organization or this party that controls the overall supply chain is also called, it is also called channel master, distribution channel, or simply channel master. So this is our manufacturer or channel master, you can say. So again, gray color is showing the flow of materials. The thing that you might notice here is that material is not only flowing in the forward direction, but also in the backward direction. So that could be because of, for example, quality problems. The product made or delivered was not as per specification because of warranty claims, or even that could be the returns stock that was not sold because of, say, promotions or a seasonal demand, and there was a policy or agreement that unsold items will be returned back to the manufacturer, for example. So different reasons could be there, but important thing is that that is actually the fourth flow, and that is the reverse flow of product or material, a reverse physical flow. It could be product, it could be material or components as well. So that is actually the reverse physical flow. That is one of the flows that we saw other than information and money. So that is the opposite flow. Actually, the material flows from left to right in this case, from supplier to manufacturer to customer, but it could flow in the opposite direction. And one important reason actually of this reverse flow is end of life cycle. So there are some agreements in some countries that when the life cycle of the product ends, it is returned to the manufacturer, and manufacturer is responsible for disposing the product. Or there are two interesting options. One is actually to dispose of the product, and very important and very interesting is remanufacture the product. So remanufacturing is also one of the supply chain strategies that some organizations utilize. Right, in some cases, of course, we might be going for recycling as well. So there could be many reasons of reverse flow of the product. We have seen few of them. So this fourth flow, the opposite flow or reverse flow of the material or product is actually important, and some organizations have a dedicated supply chain for reverse flow. So they call it reverse supply chain or sometimes reverse logistics. A classical example are the soft drinks with glass bottles. So they are provided by the food or beverage company to the retailer, and unfilled or empty bottles that are returned to that organization. For example, Pepsi or Coke. So that is also the reverse flow of the product. So they need a dedicated supply chain for that. So that is called reverse supply chain or reverse logistics. So that is a very important field as well. The rest of the things are the same. We have suppliers, and there is manufacturer, and there are some customers. And you can see that manufacturer also has different departments or processes that are involved actually to make the product and deliver it to the customer. And some of the departments are linked together, but not, for example, to some other departments. So that is also very common. So here we will see some more terminology with the help of slightly different example, more realistic example. So it has some suppliers. Let's suppose hardware supplier and frame supplier, and those suppliers have further suppliers, and those suppliers have further suppliers, and so on. So the suppliers directly supplying to this bicycle manufacturer are called tier 1 suppliers. Tier means level. And the suppliers supplying to the suppliers of this bicycle manufacturing organizations are called tier 2 suppliers, and suppliers supplying to tier 2 suppliers are called tier 3 suppliers. So that is, tier means levels, and there could be tier 4, for example, suppliers. Now this bicycle manufacturing company, as we saw already, is having different names, but generally in manufacturing, the manufacturer controls the supply chain. So we call it channel master or nucleus firm or similar word that actually shows that is the central organization in the supply chain. Supply chain exists because of this organization. And in automotive, channel master is more common in retail organization. Nucleus firm is more common for manufacturing, but both are used interchangeably as well. But specifically in automotive sector, this nucleus firm is sometimes also called OEM, original equipment manufacturer. So this left side in this figure, actually, this side is called upstream of supply chain. So material or component flow from left to right. So that is why it is called upstream. So flow starts from, whereas the flow of waterfall starts from upside towards the, for example, ground. So that is why this side is called upstream of supply chain. And in the middle is the OEM or nucleus firm or channel master. And then of course there could be some distributors or wholesalers and then retailers and finally customers. So you may have an idea that this right side is called downstream of supply chain. Downstream of the supply chain. And again, you can see the distribution channel. So this bicycle manufacturer has this channel, for example. It is supplying the cycles from wholesaler through retailer through customers, and it is also supplying directly to the customer. Now, this is obvious that once this manufacturer is supplying to wholesaler, its control is lost. It has no more control over rest of the supply chain. So, rest of the control is, for example, with the wholesaler till it reaches retailer, and then retailer controls the rest of the supply chain. But in this case, in this distribution channel, the control is with the bicycle manufacturer itself. And you could ask yourself why this bicycle manufacturer is not totally delivering the product to the customer directly, why it is using the wholesalers and retailers. And the answer is quite practical, but you can think over it. What could be the possible reasons for an organization not directly supplying to the customer in every case? So this is some of the terminology. Just two more words that I would like to clarify from this slide. One of them is that, let's suppose that this bicycle manufacturer initially manufactured the bicycles only. Suppliers were independent, wholesalers were also independent. And after some time, for example, the company either acquired one or more than one of its suppliers or started to make some of the components itself. So it is acquiring, or it is sort of increasing its capability to perform some of the functions on the upstreams. So that is called backward integration. And if the reverse happens, that is the company acquires some of the activities on the downstream or starts to perform some of the activities downstream, that is called forward integration. And backward and forward integration both are actually examples of what we call vertical integration. Now, from this figure, it looks unclear why it is called vertical integration. But if we draw this figure vertically, or if we saw this figure with respect to the flow, so if we imagine the flow of the product or components to be just like flow of the water from top down, so you will be easy to understand the words. Understand the word vertical integration. But one very important thing, you should keep in mind that an organization generally finds it difficult to fully vertically integrate. So partially you will find the answer to the question that you asked and just know that why organization doesn't do everything itself, doesn't supply directly to the customer. And partial answer is that every organization actually focuses on its core competency. So there is a competency that organization is unique in. There is something that organization is superior to the other organizations. And that is one of the reasons why its product actually sells. So that is one of the reasons. So organization actually focuses on that competency and outsource other activities, maybe material production or components of the components or delivery of the product to the customer. So organization, for example, focuses on its core competency. That might be the bicycle manufacturing process. That might be the core competency of this organization. And that is actually the case in many cases. So assembly process or maybe manufacturing process is the core competency, and the rest is outsourced. Now this is also a strategic decision, how much should be kept within the organization and how much should be outsourced. Well, I take you a very simple example that you are slightly familiar with, the example of Nestle. So in Nestle too, we should take the example of Nestle water. So water purification or whatever the steps are involved there, that is the core competency of Nestle. But what about the water bottles, plastic bottles in which that water is stored and delivered to the customer? So that bottle manufacturing is not the core competency of Nestle. People buy the water by Nestle not because of, for example, material or maybe the quality of its bottle, but it is because of the quality of the water. So that is actually the core competency that Nestle focuses on and outsource, for example, bottle manufacturing process. I give you yet another example. That is, for example, related to service organization. So I give you example of some test taking organization. So for example, there is an organization ABC, maybe some technical organization ABC, some very high-fi mechanical production company, maybe something like HMC, or you can imagine some very big organization. So these organizations many times outsource the recruitment process. So there are many organizations that are expert in recruitment. So this organization is actually expert in making some product or delivering some service, this organization ABC. But it may not be best in hiring process. It may hire some organization and some organization that is expert in that, or maybe expert in conducting tests, for example, something like NTS, for example, and outsource that process to organization XYZ and focus on its core competencies. So ultimate goal of any organization is actually two things. One is to satisfy customer and second is to maximize its net profit. Honestly speaking, it is actually to maximize the net profit through satisfying customer needs. So that is even also an old definition, but still, let me explain it first. That organization actually has invested some money to maximize its profit, but it cannot maximize its profit without satisfying customer needs. So understanding the customer needs and fulfilling them in the best way is the ultimate goal of the organization to maximize the profit. So sometimes fancy word for profit is used, that is value. So that is the difference of what customer pays minus total effort expended to fulfill. That is actually income minus expenses. The new definition sort of the goal of any supply chain of any organization actually is to satisfy customer needs, to maximize profit, as well as take care of two more things. What are those things? They are society, social aspects, and environment. So that is actually economic aspect or financial aspect, that is primary, social and environment. So these three things are sometimes called triple bottom line. So you might see some activities like you had a Honda, a seminar by Honda on safe driving. So that is called actually, that is actually called CSR activity, corporate social responsibility. Or some organizations, for example, open a school or a hospital for public. So they show that they are actually spending what they are earning from the society. And environment, of course, you have studied some standards on that as well. So ultimate goal is at least to maximize the profit through satisfaction of customers, plus some social and environment related uh, contribution of the organization as well. So this was a quick introduction of what is supply chain and what is supply chain management, but still I would like to I will skip this example of Honda supply chain. I had discussed in the live class. So this is the formal definition of supply chain management, that it deals with the management of materials, information, and financial flows. Materials, information, and financial flows in a network consisting of different parties like suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, and customers. I hope this is clear to you, that what is supply chain, what is supply chain management, and some basic terminology related to supply chain management. We will continue with this discussion in the next segment. Thank you very much.